Monsters don't always have claws. Sometimes they bring flowers, promise forever, and slide a gold ring onto your finger. For years I thought that ring was a shield. I believed the man who gave it to me, until I had to believe my own eyes instead. My name is Margaret Hale, though most folks in Willow Ridge, Ohio call me Maggie. On Sundays you'll find me at the farmer's market, floral dress, white hair tucked in a scarf, counting change into a chipped blue enamel teacup. People see a kind old lady with good cookies. They don't see the secret I carried for more than 50 years, or the night a quiet house finally spoke out loud. If you're hearing me, it's because I want this story to reach two people: the woman who thinks silence is safer, and the child who believes pain is her fault. It isn't. The road I walked was not neat or pretty. It had broken glass. But there were lights ahead, and I will point to them for you. Remember this date: August 14th, 1972. I will never forget the sound of the screen door latch, a small click that meant everything, and the steady tick-tick of the kitchen timer in an empty room. That was the night I opened a door I had prayed would never need opening, and the night help arrived when I did not know how to ask. If this finds you, tell me where you're watching from, just a city or a small town on a map. It helps me keep going. This is the story of how a perfect life cracked, and how a mother gathered her children, found a way out, and walked them home. I grew up where winters bit your knuckles and summers smelled like cut hay. Willow Ridge was small and steady: porch swings, church bells, a grain truck that rattled the same corner every afternoon. My father stacked pallets at the co-op and came home with dust settled in the lines of his hands. My mother hemmed dresses for half the county, a thimble on her finger and a pincushion strapped to her wrist like a tiny red heart. She had one rule she said more than any prayer: study so you never depend on a man. She said it in the morning while warming oatmeal and again at night while setting bread to rise. She never raised her voice, but those words stood taller than the men in our town. I tucked them in my pocket the way boys tucked pocket knives, something useful to keep close. School felt safe to me from the start. Books did not shout. Numbers kept their promises if you treated them right. I liked the sound of chalk on the slate and the hush that fell when a story reached the good part. After graduation, I stayed close to those halls. At 19, the principal offered me work as a school aide, and soon after, a teacher's assistant. The pay was modest, but the work felt right in my bones. I sharpened pencils, tied shoelaces, and learned the names of shy children who hid their best selves behind lowered eyes. Some girls I grew up with married by 18. By 20, they balanced babies on their hips and laundry on their minds. They teased me kindly on market days. "Maggie, you keep reading like that and no man will know what to do with you." I smiled and said, maybe that was the point. Then I counted change into my blue enamel teacup, a chipped thing that made a cheerful clink when quarters met the metal. At home, we had enough. Not plenty, not trouble, enough. A roof that held, a table that didn't wobble, a mother who could stretch soup, and a father who could fix anything with wire and patience. On Sundays, we wheeled a cookie table onto the church lawn. My mother wore a floral dress. I wore a plain one and a scarf to keep my hair from the wind. People said our snickerdoodles tasted like they remembered from childhood. That felt like holy work to me, too, helping someone remember sweetness. I kept a small ledger under my pillow where I wrote down ambitions I hardly spoke aloud. Save for night classes, learn to drive the pickup, buy a used typewriter, read every book the librarian recommended in a year. I didn't want a big life. I wanted a dependable one. Work I could be proud of, a door that opened when I turned the knob, a kind voice at day's end that did not turn sharp. Willow Ridge kept its secrets the way barns keep shadows, quietly, as if that was their purpose. I didn't have a secret yet, just a wish to be loved without losing the girl my mother raised. I believed it could be done. I believed it with the solid faith people give to things they have not yet tested. That summer, the brass band tuned up for the 4th of July picnic, and I carried a tray of cookies across the green. The air smelled like fireworks and fried chicken. Children chased each other through cottonwood fluff that fell like slow snow. I had no reason to think the day would be different from any other, until a man I had never seen before stepped out of a circle of town leaders and asked if I liked to dance. He came with flowers and good promises. For a season, I believed every word. His name was Daniel Whitaker, and everybody in Willow Ridge already knew it. He owned Whitaker Lumber, the yard at the edge of town where stacks of planks rose higher than a church steeple. He kept the town's books as council treasurer, too, which meant people shook his hand a half-second longer than they shook other hands. When he smiled, men stood a little straighter and women said, "Well now," as if something orderly had just happened. He found me by the cookie table at the 4th of July picnic. The brass band was tuning, the grill smoke curled sweet, and cottonwood fluff floated like slow snow. Daniel took off his hat, not in a showy way, just decent. "Miss Hale," he said, like he had asked my name ahead of time. "I hear your mother makes the best snickerdoodles in 3 counties. He chose 2, paid with $1, and told me to keep the change. The coins rang soft in my blue enamel teacup. When the band started a waltz, he asked if I liked to dance. I told him I mostly liked to watch. "Then let me count for you," he said, holding his hand out the way a man offers a steady step off a wagon. He counted 1, 2, 3 under his breath, and I followed, plain and simple. We made one circle, then another. He did not pull me close or show off. He watched my feet to keep me from stumbling and thanked me when the song ended, as if I had done him a favor. After that night, Daniel walked me home from church suppers and market days. He brought practical gifts instead of grand ones, hand cream for my mother's sewing, a box of finishing nails for my father's small repairs, a thin book of poems for me with a brown paper cover. Inside, he wrote, "For the lady who counts courage quieter than most." We sat on the porch and read a few lines aloud. When my mother opened the screen door, the latch made its small click, and Daniel would stand up out of respect. He kept his coat folded beside him. He kept his voice low. 6 weeks in, he asked about my work. I told him I liked being a teacher's assistant because children tried again when you told them they could. "A town runs on that," he said. "On people who help other folks try again." His praise felt like shade on a hot day, useful, not flashy. By autumn, we took slow walks past the lumberyard. He told me how board feet turned into payroll, and how payroll turned into groceries on neighbors' tables. He said numbers told a story if you listened. I said I believed that. He smiled like we'd shared a secret worth keeping. When he asked to speak to my father, he came with his good jacket and a single white lily wrapped in paper. They sat at the kitchen table. I stood by the stove pretending to watch the kettle. My father listened more than he talked. When he finally spoke, his voice held both caution and kindness. "If my daughter says yes," he said, "I won't stand in her way." I said yes. It surprised no one and still surprised me. The wedding was simple. Church, cousins with a fiddle, potluck dishes lined up like cheerful soldiers. My mother hemmed my dress. Daniel borrowed cufflinks from the hardware man. We moved into a starter home by the sycamores, 2 small rooms and a porch that faced the road. In late fall, when the leaves dropped, we could see the lumber stacks lifting above the rooftops like a wooden skyline. We had a bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a kettle that sang too loudly. It felt like wealth to me. In those first weeks, Daniel fixed the sticky drawer, tightened the porch rail, and learned how I took my tea. He told everyone he admired a woman with her own mind. He told me he liked how I kept a ledger for our little household. "We're partners," he said, and the word sat sweet on my tongue. For a season, everything matched the picture people keep in their heads when they hear the word home. Even the screen door latch sounded friendly when it clicked at supper time. Season's turn. The sweet one did too, into something I didn't yet know how to name. That first year tasted like warm bread. Morning light came through our little kitchen in soft squares, and the kettle sang before the town bell did. Daniel left early for the lumber yard, hat in hand, and I packed him a sandwich wrapped in wax paper with his favorite mustard line down the center like a neat road. He kissed my forehead, tapped the doorframe twice, a habit I found steadying, and the screen door latch made its small, friendly click behind him. I kept my hours at the school part-time because I liked the sound a room makes when children understand something for the first time. Twice a week, I shelved books at the library in the evening. The librarian, Mrs. Park, let me take home discarded magazines for recipe clippings. We were not rich, but we were never short on ideas. When Lila came the next spring, pink and fierce and loud enough to startle the sparrows, the house learned a new rhythm. Daniel painted her name on a plank trimmed from the yard and nailed it above the crib. He held her like a person holds a miracle, careful, a little afraid he might spill it. Neighbors brought casseroles and hand-me-down sleepers, and the church ladies took turns rocking her after service so I could drink coffee while it was still hot. We made small traditions. On Fridays, I set out my blue enamel teacup and we emptied our pockets of coins, my library tips, his change from coffee at the council office. We called it the Lemon Fund, though sometimes it bought flour or postage. Once a month, Daniel balanced our little ledger with a pencil sharpened to a sting. "We're a clean set of books," he would say, pleased. I was pleased too. Even the hard pieces came wrapped in kindness then. Lila's colic gave us long nights, but Daniel walked the floor with her and counted softly to 100, starting over when he lost track. He told jokes that made no sense until I laughed, and then they made all the sense in the world. He remembered to replace the porch bulb before it burned out. He returned borrowed pie tins the day after we used them. If a neighbor's fence leaned, he and the hardware man righted it by dusk. From the church steps, we probably looked like a postcard. Daniel with his steady manner, me with a tidy bun and a clean cardigan, Lila in a bonnet someone had knit long before she was born, as if the town had been saving it for us. People said, "You two are good for Willow Ridge." I believed them. I felt useful in a way that made my shoulders square and my breath come easy. On Sundays, I set up the cookie table with my mother. We sold out more often now that folks came to coo at Lila and stay to buy an extra dozen. Daniel lingered nearby, talking playground bids and road gravel with men who wore the same brand of work boots he did. When he slipped $2 into the church fund without being asked, I felt something warm open inside my chest. I tucked it away like a note I'd read again on a hard day. There were no hard days to speak of. Just a handful of small irritations anyone could blame on tiredness, a mislaid receipt, a missing spoon, the kettle left squealing too long while I changed the baby. We laughed them off. Or I did, and Daniel let me. If I noticed the kitchen timer ticking more often, marking feedings and naps and laundry cycles, it felt like order, not warning. If I saw Daniel straighten a picture frame twice before leaving for a meeting, I chalked it up to care. If I woke before dawn and lay still listening for Lila's breath, that seemed like ordinary mothering. Seasons turn whether we're ready or not. The sweet one did too. It didn't end with a crash, just a tilt I only recognized later, when I set a marble down on our table and watched it roll. Hairline cracks don't shout, they whisper, and I was busy counting blessings. By autumn, the lumberyard took on a contract big enough to make the stacks look like a wooden skyline. At the same time, the council argued over a playground, a culvert, and whether the town clock needed fixing or replacing. Daniel wore both hats, mill owner and treasurer, and the weight showed up first in his jaw. It set a little harder when he thought no one was looking. He still carried in groceries. He still changed light bulbs before they burned out. But small things began to lean his way. The measuring spoons moved to a different drawer, and if I put them back, they wandered again. The bath towels had to be folded in thirds, not halves. The kettle belonged on the back burner, never the front. Each change was nothing on its own, like a single thread tugged from a sweater. Together they made a fraying sound I couldn't name. At church and in town, neighbors saw only charm. "We're lucky to have Daniel minding our books," folks said, clapping his shoulder. When he donated scrap wood for the Scouts' birdhouses, the hardware man told me he wished more leaders were cut from Daniel's cloth. I nodded. I wanted it to be true more than I wanted to be right. At home, he began asking accounting questions about ordinary things. "How much was the flour? Why the name brand soap? Did you check for a coupon?" His tone wasn't loud. If anything, it was careful. But I felt myself shrinking around the answers, making them smaller to fit the space he left me. Lila started daycare 2 mornings a week so I could keep my library shift. Daniel insisted on picking her up whenever council ran short. "It's on my way," he said, and maybe it was. He began taking her to the yard afterward to help with papers. When I arrived, she sat quietly in a chair too big for her, hands folded like she was waiting for a test. "Tell your mother what a good helper you are," he would prompt, smiling. She nodded, eyes on the floor. The screen door latch grew louder to me somehow, the neat click when he came in, the matching click when he went out. I learned to tell from the sound whether he was running late or right on time. If late, he wanted silence. If on time, he wanted order. I started arranging the room to match the door. At supper, small corrections multiplied. Knives face in. Cups at the right-hand corner. Coats on the right hook. When I forgot, he didn't scold. He simply stood and fixed it while I watched. "Just keeping us tidy," he'd say, light as salt. I laughed as if it were funny. It wasn't funny. It was a measuring of space I couldn't see until I ran out of it. Once, the kitchen timer dinged, and I didn't hear it over Lila's song. He rose, turned it off, and set it down with the button pointing to 0, as if 0 were a virtue I should practice. "Timers are meant to be obeyed," he said, smiling like it was a joke. I smiled back because some conversations are not safe to have. On the sidewalk, he still tipped his hat to old men and lifted heavy bags for women at the market. People watched us pass and said we were good for Willow Ridge. I smiled and kept walking, my hands steady on the stroller handle, my eyes counting cracks in the sidewalk as if they could tell me where to place my feet. Late one night, after a council session ran long, he sat at the table and rubbed his temples. "Budgets don't care about feelings," he said. I poured tea into my blue enamel teacup and slid it over. He stared past it, then lifted it without thanks, as if the cup had risen to his hand on its own. He took a sip and set it down exactly 1 inch from the coaster. I told myself this was what responsibility looked like on a tired man. I told myself the house would feel easy again once the contract finished and the playground was built. I told myself a lot of kind lies, because kind lies are sometimes the only way to sleep. The first storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came with a fever, a stain on the rug, and a quiet that scared me more than shouting. Thomas came in late winter, round and red-faced and loud enough to bully sleep out of the house. He was a good baby with a stubborn cough the doctor said would pass. It did not pass quickly. Nights turned into long walks across the living room, me counting breaths while the kitchen timer kept the medicine hours honest. Lila padded behind me with her blanket, humming a tune to calm her brother. That day, everything landed at once. Thomas's fever climbed. The stew boiled over. Lila spilled juice on the rug. A stack of towels waited for folding like a small mountain with no weather report. I had one eye on the clock and one ear pressed to Thomas's chest, listening for something that would tell me we were fine. When Daniel's car door shut, my shoulders dropped in relief. I wiped my hands, fixed my hair, and tried to make the room look like a picture of welcome home. I did not get far. He stepped in and looked around. The stew splatter, the wet rag, the towels, the red cheeks on our son. "What is this?" he said, 4 words neat as fence posts. "Thomas is feverish," I answered. "I'm keeping him cool and—" Daniel set his briefcase down harder than he thought he would. The sound startled Lila. She scooped her blanket off the floor and pressed into the corner. "I work all day, Maggie," he said. No shout, no curse, just a tightness that made the room feel smaller. "I know," I said softly. "I'm doing my best." His eyes went to the stain on the rug, to the towels, to the kettle singing too long on the stove. He lifted the rag, squeezed water out once, and dropped it into the sink like a verdict. "Your best," he said. "Is this your best?" What I remember next is the wall behind me and the way my breath sounded like it belonged to someone else. One slap, not a second. A single crack in the quiet. The baby startled. Lila cried a sound I had never heard her make. Daniel stood very still, as if he had woken from falling. He stared at his own hand like it didn't fit his arm. Then he stepped onto the porch. The screen door latch made its small click, and the house exhaled a little, the way a chest does after a held breath hurts. I held Thomas and rocked until his cry softened to hiccups. I wiped Lila's face and told her we were okay, even though the word felt loose in my mouth. I turned off the timer because I could hear it too well. I set the kettle right and spooned the stew into bowls that none of us touched. When Daniel came back in, he placed a jar of flowers on the table, mismatched blooms from the yard even though it was hardly spring. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm tired. It won't happen again." He said it like a promise to himself more than to me. I nodded because nodding was easier than speaking. I said, "We're fine," because I wanted it to be true more than I wanted anything. I folded the towels exactly in thirds and put them in the right cabinet. I scrubbed the stain until it blurred. I tucked the moment into a corner of my mind where I kept wrong turns and lost buttons. That night, when the house went quiet, I studied the shape of the bruise in the mirror, a thin shadow where only I would see it. I told myself marriages had weather, that every home gets a storm, that good men can be unkind and still be good. I built a little story out of those thoughts and slept inside it like a tent. In the morning, he took his coffee in my blue enamel teacup and kissed the air above my hair. He straightened a picture frame and reminded me about the council meeting. I packed his lunch with the mustard line down the middle and watched the porch swallow him whole. Eggshells are invisible until you feel them under every step. After that winter, the house rearranged itself without moving a chair. I could tell from the car door whether Daniel was late or right on time. If late, he wanted silence. If on time, he wanted order. I lined up the forks like soldiers and wiped a clean counter twice. It wasn't housekeeping anymore. It was a kind of math. If everything was exact, maybe the sum would be peace. Eggshell living has its own sounds. The kitchen timer ticked a little louder, as if it were counting not minutes but chances. The screen door latch made its small click at dusk, and my shoulders answered before my mouth did. Even my blue enamel teacup began to feel like a ledger. Coins clinked in, and I told myself they were savings, not a scorecard. Lila changed in ways small enough to argue with. She watched the door when the latch clicked, then looked away fast so I wouldn't notice. She hummed to herself while lining toy blocks in perfect rows, then pushed the rows out of place with her foot and apologized to no one. She used new words that didn't belong in a child's mouth. Special, secret, don't tell or we'll be in trouble. She said them softly, like she was practicing a line for a play she didn't want to be in. Daniel's rules multiplied but never announced themselves. Towels in thirds, not halves. Knives facing in, shoes pointed toward the door. If I forgot, he didn't raise his voice. He stood and fixed the thing while I watched. Just keeping us tidy, he'd say, smiling. It was a gentle sentence that felt like a padlock. He began insisting on routines with Lila. I'll handle bath time, he'd say, even if I'd already drawn the water. She helps me with papers, he'd say, closing the study door. He explained it all in the language of fatherhood, and small towns respect the sound of that word. I wanted to respect it too. I wanted to be wrong about the unease moving through my chest like a draft you can't find the source of. A mother's body knows before her mind allows it. Mine started signaling in small alarms. A breath I couldn't catch when the latch clicked. A sting behind the eyes when Lila flinched at ordinary touch. A need to stand in hallways I used to pass through. I told myself I was tired. Then I told myself I was foolish. Then I stopped telling myself anything and listened. One afternoon at the library, Mrs. Park watched Lila stack return slips in meticulous piles. She's precise, the librarian said, kind voice, careful eyes. Some children get quieter when they're working hard on being good. I nodded like I understood and went home with a book I did not open. That night I changed the bed and found myself looking at the narrow space between mattress and springs. The thought came like a hand on my back. I slid the mattress up and tucked a pair of sewing scissors there. My hands shook afterward, not from fear of Daniel, but from fear of the person I might have to become if I was right. I started keeping small lists on scraps of paper. Doctor numbers, church nights, the bus schedule pinned behind the curtain. I put a roll of dollars in the cookie tin and told myself it was for Christmas stamps. I placed Lila's shoes by the door instead of under her bed. None of it was dramatic. All of it felt like learning a house by touch in the dark. Daniel noticed the order and praised it. This is how a home runs, he said, drinking his coffee from my blue enamel teacup as if the cup had chosen to serve him. He kissed the air above my hair and went to the council office, and I stood very still, listening to the timer tick out the last seconds on nothing at all. When Lila asked if we could read with the light on instead of the lamp, I said yes. When she asked if she could keep her door half open at night, I said yes. When she woke from a dream and came to the hallway without speaking, I moved so she could see me first, not the door behind me. A house can be taught to hold its breath. It can also be taught to speak. I didn't know which one ours would do next. I only knew the latch would click again, the timer would tick, and sometime soon, I would have to stop making the kind of bargains that put a mother on the wrong side of her own heart. The words I feared came as a whisper, in the dark when the house was quiet enough to hear them. I found Lila awake, eyes open to the slice of streetlight on her ceiling. I tucked the blanket under her chin the way my mother did for me. Can't sleep, Ladybug? She swallowed. Mama? I'm here. She looked at the doorway first, at the space a person might fill, and then back at me. Can we not take baths with Daddy anymore? All the air left my lungs and came back different. I kept my voice small, like a hand you hold out to a skittish bird. Tell me why you're asking. She pressed her lips together, as if holding water she didn't want to spill. He says it's our secret, she whispered. He says I'll be in trouble if I tell. I felt the floor tilt. I did not ask for details. I did not need them to believe my child. Thank you for telling me, I said. I believe you. You did nothing wrong. Her shoulders dropped a little, like a bundle set down. She scooted closer until her forehead touched my collarbone. We listened to each other breathe. The kitchen timer clicked from the empty kitchen. Tick, tick. As if counting the seconds it had taken me too long to hear this. "We're going to change things," I said, when my voice returned. "He will not bathe you. He will not come into your room at night. I will make sure of it. What if he gets mad?" Her voice was as thin as thread. "Then he'll be mad somewhere that isn't here," I said. "I promise. Promises are heavy. You feel their weight and you lift anyway." I tucked Lila in and kissed her brow. Then I moved through the house on quiet feet. I rolled a few dollars and coins from the blue enamel teacup into a handkerchief and tied it tight. I took the little stack of birth certificates from behind the dish towels and slid them into my skirt pocket. I checked the bus schedule I had pinned behind the curtain and traced the line to Columbus with my finger. If we left at dawn, we could make the 10 o'clock bus. I laid Thomas's diaper bag beside Lila's school satchel and slipped an extra pair of socks into each. I placed our shoes by the door, toes pointing outward. In our bedroom, I lifted the mattress and put the sewing scissors in the pocket of my cardigan. My hands shook, not from fear of Daniel, but from the size of what I had finally allowed myself to know. I folded one sweater and one dress into a paper bag and wrote our last name on it, as if the bag needed to remember who it served. Back in Lila's room, I sat in the chair by her bed and watched her breathe. I tried to pray and couldn't find words that weren't made of fire. The timer clicked down to silence. The house held its breath. I held mine with it. The car door closed outside. The screen door latch clicked. Daniel's footsteps crossed the floor, steady, familiar, like every evening of our lives. He paused at the study, then in the hallway. He looked in on sleeping Thomas. He looked in on us. I kept my eyes on Lila's hair and my hand on her shoulder so he would see she was not alone. "You're up late," he said, mild, as if nothing in the world had shifted. "Long day?" "Long enough," I answered, and I met his gaze the way you hold a hot pan. Firm, brief, without flinching. He shrugged as if the room had bored him and turned away. The latch clicked again as he went to the porch for air. I waited for the porch boards to creak. I waited for the kettle to make its small song and for it not to. Then I stood, checked our bags once more, and sat back down. Dawn was 3 hours away. It would be a long 3 hours, then a quick morning, then a road I had not walked yet. If you have ever waited for morning with a promise in your hands, you know how each minute is a mountain and a bridge at once. Morning did not come the way I planned. The night broke first, August 14th, 1972. It was a Monday prayer circle night. I went to church because it was the only hour each week when the fear loosened its grip. We bowed our heads, we named our sick by name, we asked for strength that sounded ordinary enough to pass for bread. When I walked home, the cicadas were working hard at their song, and the sky still held a little color along the trees. The house felt wrong before I crossed the threshold. Too still. No kettle, no radio. Only the kitchen timer ticking in an empty room. Tick, tick, tick. Though nothing was in the oven, I slipped off my shoes so the floor would not talk for me. Thomas slept heavy on his stomach, hand open like he'd fallen asleep catching fireflies. The study door was closed. Lila's door was almost closed. From the narrow seam of that door came a sound I had never heard in my house. A muffled cry. Not loud, not long, but shaped like a hand over a mouth. The world tilted. Something quiet in me broke its rope. I pushed the door open. I will not put the scene on any page. Some truths do not need ink to exist. I will only say this. What I saw did not belong in a child's room, and a mother knows the shape of harm faster than she knows her own name. "Out," I said. My voice surprised me, flat as a board, steady as a ruler. "Out of this room." Daniel straightened like a man late to a meeting. "You're overreacting," he said. "We're fine." "We are not fine," I said, and stepped between him and the bed. My hand found the sewing scissors in my cardigan pocket, like it had been traveling there for years. "Leave." He took a step to go around me. I raised the scissors. "Do not test me," I said, and my hands only shook after. On the porch, a board creaked. Then a voice. "Maggie? You all right?" It was Mr. Lowell, our neighbor, a man who checked on porch lights and carried spare fuses in his coat. The screen door latch clicked. Behind him came the heavier steps of Sheriff Green. Daniel smoothed his shirt and composed his face like a man settling for a photograph. "Gentlemen," he said, warm as a handshake, "this is a private matter." Mr. Lowell looked past him and saw Lila, small and still as a sparrow after it hits a window. He looked at me with the scissors in my fist and at the bed I stood in front of. Sheriff Green's eyes took in the same map. He didn't hurry. He didn't blink too much. He just stepped deeper into the room until the truth had to make room for him. "Daniel," the sheriff said. Not loud, not soft. "You'll come with me and we'll talk at the station." Daniel laughed like a man whose name appears on donation plaques. "You know who I am?" "I do," Sheriff Green said. "That's why we'll use the bright lights." For a breath, I thought the room might split in two, the side where positions held and the side where children did. Then Lila spoke, very small from the bed. "Mama?" Just one word. It was enough. The house told the truth aloud with that word. The space changed shape. Daniel's smile failed him. He looked at Mr. Lowell, at the sheriff, at me, and he knew the door had opened the wrong way for him this time. The sheriff gestured toward the hall. "Now," he said. Daniel went because men like him expect to leave rooms standing. They walked him out. The screen door latch made its usual click, a small sound that meant everything. I sat on the edge of the bed and gathered my child. I wanted to be made of iron. I was made of breath and bone and shaking. Mr. Lowell stood guard in the doorway like a fence post that wasn't going to rot anytime soon. "Do you need a doctor?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And a pastor. And a woman who knows what to do next." "We'll call them," he said, already moving. The timer in the kitchen finally ticked to 0 and stopped. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt like air after a storm when you realize the roof held. Morning brought bail, gossip, and doubt. It also brought 3 names I did not yet know would save us: Pastor Ruth, Mrs. Eunice Park, and Dr. Aria Morales. Morning tries to make everything ordinary again. It didn't. The sun came up anyway, laying pale squares on the kitchen floor like nothing had happened. The kitchen timer sat at 0. The blue enamel teacup still held yesterday's coins. The house looked the same and felt like a place that had learned a new language overnight. By 9, Daniel had posted bail. Word traveled faster than the milk truck. At the market, whispers moved from the apples to the bread like bees looking for a louder flower. "Misunderstanding," some said. "Domestic business," others said. People like tidy stories. Ours wasn't tidy. I did not go to the market. I sat at the table and kept my hand on Lila's back while she colored in wide, careful strokes. Thomas napped in the crib with his mouth open like a little bird. Every sound outside, car door, screen slam, footsteps, made my shoulders climb toward my ears. I didn't know if Daniel would try our handle. I only knew I would not open the door. A knock came I recognized. 3 soft raps and a pause, the way people who serve others learn to knock. Pastor Ruth stood on the porch in a plain dress and good shoes meant for standing. "May I come in, Maggie?" she asked. She did not try to step past me until I said yes. When she saw Lila, she lowered herself to the child's height and said hello without a single question attached. Then she looked at me the way women look at women when they are taking a measure that has nothing to do with size. "I brought someone," she said. Behind her came Mrs. Eunice Park, our librarian, with a satchel full of forms and a face like the quiet inside a church. "We'll be brief," Eunice said. "I know you're tired." They set their things on the table and asked only what needed asking: names, dates, safe numbers. When my hands shook, Eunice steadied the paper with one finger so my signature wouldn't wander. Pastor Ruth wrote 3 names on an index card in careful pen: Sheriff Green, already a witness, Child Services, and Dr. Aria Morales, Haven House, Columbus. "Dr. Morales runs a shelter and clinic," she said. "She knows the path out and how to walk it without losing your breath." "Shelter," I repeated, tasting the word like a foreign one I'd always meant to learn. "We'll call her now," Eunice said, already dialing from the kitchen wall phone, voice trimmed of anything but usefulness. She spoke in short sentences, then handed me the receiver. "Mrs. Hale," a warm voice said. Dr. Aria Morales sounded like someone who could carry 2 buckets at once and not spill. "We have housing ready if you can come today. I can place you in a part-time office job this week. You will not be alone for one more night." Columbus felt far. It was really just 3 hours away, but distance is not only miles. I looked at Lila's small hand on the crayon and at Thomas's blanket rising and falling. "We'll come," I said. And the word we steadied me. Eunice opened her satchel like a magician's hat. Bus schedules, a stamped envelope, a list titled, "What to Pack When You Leave in a Hurry." Pastor Ruth wrote Haven House on a slip of paper for Lila and drew a small house with a big roof. "This is where we're going," I said, and my daughter nodded like she'd been waiting for someone to name a safe place out loud. We packed with the math of people who can count only to what matters: documents, medicine, diapers, 2 changes of clothes, the blue enamel teacup because I wanted the sound of home to come with us. Eunice took the envelope I'd prepared with birth certificates and tucked it into her own bag. "I'll carry this until you're on the bus," she said. "Loose hands for the babies." By afternoon, Sheriff Green walked us to the station. Not in a parade, not in a secret. Just a quiet convoy of what had to happen next. Mr. Lowell locked our door behind us and handed me the key like it still belonged to me. It did. I had decided so. On the bus, I held Lila's hand and set the teacup between my shoes. The screen door latch clicked once more in my mind, not a warning this time, but a bell that meant, "Go now." The road unspooled. Willow Ridge got small in the window. Ahead, a city I did not know held a roof with our names on it and a desk with papers I could file until my hands remembered steady work. "Shelter," I said again. Quieter. And this time the word tasted like bread. Haven House sat on a quiet block in Columbus, a brick building with a blue door and a front garden that looked like someone believed in seasons. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of lemon and laundry soap. A volunteer handed me a key on a ribbon and said, "Welcome home for as long as you need it." I had never been handed a home before. I closed my fingers around the ribbon and tried not to cry. Our room held 2 twin beds, a crib, a dresser, and a bulletin board with clothespins for notes. The window faced a maple tree. It was not much. It was enough. That first night I slept like a person who had been holding a roof up with her shoulders, and finally set it down. Dr. Aria Morales met us the next morning. Sensible shoes, kind eyes, a clipboard that did not make me feel small. She spoke to Lila at the child's pace, in the child's chair. "You get to choose," she said gently. "Door open or closed? Lamp on or off? Words now or later?" Lila chose later with the door half open and the lamp on. Later came in pieces: a drawing, a nod, a sentence short as a bead. Dr. Morales never hurried the string. Thomas adapted as toddlers do. He learned the rhythm of the cafeteria line, the squeak of the playroom swings, the click of a new door that wasn't our old screen door latch. He slept hard at nap time and woke laughing at the dust motes that danced in the light. Watching him learn this different normal made me brave enough to learn mine. Haven House ran on routine. Breakfast at 8. Chore chart at 9. Group meeting at 10. I did not think I wanted a group until I sat in a circle of women who knew how to pass a box of tissues without making a ceremony of it. We said our names. We said what we needed today. A phone call returned. A bus pass renewed. 10 quiet minutes. We clapped when someone got a small victory because small things are where the big things live. In the afternoons, I took the bus to the office job Dr. Morales had placed me in, front desk at a community clinic 2 blocks away. I learned to answer phones with steadiness, to schedule appointments without promising miracles, to photocopy forms so the text didn't tilt. The work felt anchor-heavy in the good way, the kind of weight that keeps a small boat from banging into every dock. At night, after lights out, I sat at the little desk by our window and learned paperwork as protection. Dr. Morales taught it like a language. Keep copies. Date every page. Write what happened, not what you fear. Collect names and times like life vests. I made a binder with tabs. Documents, school, medical, legal, budget. The binder was ugly and perfect. Each page I slid into a sleeve felt like a brick in a wall no one would push through again. Mrs. Eunice Park sent a packet from Willow Ridge, a letter from the school principal offering a reference, library recommendations for Lila, 2 pressed leaves from the sycamores by our old porch. I put the leaves in the bulletin board corner and told myself they were a souvenir, not a summons. Lila started seeing Dr. Klein, the child therapist on Haven's 2nd floor. Once a week, play therapy with sand trays and tiny wooden people. She chose where to place the figures and, in choosing, told truths her mouth wasn't ready to carry. On the 3rd week, she drew our old kitchen. What sound do you remember there? Dr. Klein asked softly. The timer, Lila said. Tick, tick. Then she drew a big X over the door. I breathed for the first time in years all the way to the bottom of my lungs. Bills got paid. The binder got thicker. I learned bus routes by heart. I learned the names of 3 women whose laughs could lift a corridor. Tasha, Imani, and Rosa. We traded recipes and coupons and the kind of advice that starts with, "You can say no." On weekends, I worked an extra hour and brought home a cheap bouquet to put in a jelly jar. The room looked like people lived in it, not just hid there. Sometimes the past walked in uninvited, on a smell, a phrase, a news clip about Willow Ridge. When it did, I held the binder, warmed a cup of tea, and named 5 things in the room that were real and mine. Window, lamp, crib, socks, key on a ribbon. The maple turned, then bared itself, then sprouted new leaves. One evening, Lila looked out and said, "This tree knows how to start over." I said yes, and the word didn't wobble. Rumors fade, roots grow. News from Willow Ridge would reach us anyway, and life had a way of sending a gentler man with the mail. Rumors have short legs in the city. They can't keep up. In Columbus, people were busy with their own lives, and our past from Willow Ridge thinned out like fog by noon. Once in a while, a letter arrived. Mrs. Eunice Park sent clippings about library fundraisers and a note saying the Scouts finally built that playground. "You were right to leave," she wrote. "Rightness can be quiet, but it holds." News of Daniel came sideways, the way weather does. A former mill hand passed through the clinic and recognized my name on a form. He lowered his voice. "Boss took on too much," he said. Numbers didn't square. Council's looking. I did not ask for more. Later, a clerk from the county office mentioned a hearing, missing receipts, late filings, the kind of trouble he used to warn others about. It all happened away from us. No door knocks. No midnight calls. Just the sound of someone else's house learning a language we already knew. Consequences. Life here learned our names. Lila grew long-legged and sharp-eyed. She joined the debate club, not to win arguments but to practice saying no with evidence behind it. I want the kind of knowledge that makes doors open, she told Dr. Klein, who smiled like she'd been waiting to hear that sentence. When Lila brought home a pamphlet from a college visit, pre-law highlighted in yellow, she placed it on the table like a seed packet. I think this is mine, she said. We planted it together. Applications, essays, the long middle where waiting tries to be the boss. The acceptance letter came on a windy day. We taped it above the desk next to the binder. 2 kinds of protection side by side. One for the past, one for the future. Thomas loved charts in the clinic waiting room. He could stare at the human body diagram as if it were a treasure map. He learned to pronounce stethoscope before spaghetti. When the pediatrician let him listen to his own heartbeat, he went very still. It sounds like feet, he whispered. Running. He started telling everyone he'd be a doctor for kids. No grand speeches, just a boy who liked to help small people breathe easier. By then, I had moved from the front desk to office coordinator. I color-coded calendars, filed grants without tilting the text, and learned the exact weight of the stamp that carried a good letter home. Paperwork turned from shield to tool. I taught other mothers the binder trick, tabs and dates, and the power of writing down what happened in words anyone could read. The mail came like clockwork, and with it came Victor Nguyen, a retired postmaster who volunteered to drop off overflow sacks and fix bulky labelers. He had a careful way about him, the kind you notice when someone respects both envelopes and people. He showed Thomas how to fold a letter so it sits snug in its jacket. He told Lila there's a rule in the mail. Everything finds where it's going if you give it the right address. Victor never asked for my story. He learned it the way you learn a route, slowly by walking it. He brought tangerines when the clinic was short on fruit, turned jam jars into vases for the break room, and once repaired the screen on our room's window without making a show of it. Drafts shouldn't choose for you, he said, and left a tiny screwdriver on the sill in case I ever wanted to tighten a hinge myself. Kindness can be loud. His wasn't. It sounded like, I'll wait, take your time, and did the bus run late? Let me check the schedule for you. When he finally asked if I might like coffee from the stand 2 blocks over, he framed it like a map. I'm headed that way anyway. If you say no, I'll still bring extra napkins for the clinic. I said yes because it felt like choosing a bench in the sun, not a bind I couldn't untie. Years bend around steady things. Lila left for college with 2 suitcases, a scholarship, and a spine made of yes and no in the right places. Thomas volunteered at the clinic and learned to carry toddlers without making them cry. I learned to sit on a park bench with Victor and share silence that didn't require translation. We watched bus after bus arrive and depart and named the trees as they changed. Maple, ginkgo, sweet gum. They know how to start over, I said. Victor nodded. They also know how to stay. A letter from Willow Ridge arrived one afternoon with Mrs. Park's careful script. The council had finished their audit. Daniel was no longer treasurer. There would be more meetings, more numbers, more words I didn't need to hold. I set the letter under a magnet and boiled water for tea. I did not shake. Seeds don't shout when they open. They just become... Our life did that, quietly, surely, root by root. Years later, a cookie table, grandchildren, a blue teacup, and the one thing I want you, the listener, to carry out the door. On Sundays, I still set up a cookie booth, same old folding table, same floral dress. My blue enamel teacup sits at the corner for change, chip, and all. Children lean in on tiptoes to point at the biggest snickerdoodle, and their grandparents tell them, "That's the one I used to like when I was your age." I smile because time is kind when it loops like that. Lila comes sometimes with her case files tucked under her arm. She is a lawyer now, the kind who looks people in the eye and tells them where the door is and how to open it. She keeps business cards in her pocket for women who whisper questions they've carried too long. "You can call me," she says, steady, never pushing. When I watch her talk, I see the small girl who once asked if bath time could be different, and I bless every mile between then and now. Thomas stops by after clinic hours, stethoscope tucked away because he doesn't bring work to the market unless someone asks. He crouches to listen to a toddler's chest when a mother looks worried, then reminds her what healthy breath sounds like. "Like feet running," he tells the child, and they laugh. He buys 2 cookies and claims one is for a colleague. He eats both on the walk to the car. Sometimes Victor carries the bakery box for me when the day is done. He still fixes screens no one else notices and folds letters like small miracles. We don't make a parade out of our love. We sit on a bench and share a sandwich, name the trees, and let quiet be the language we speak best. When the wind lifts, he shields the flame of the match as I light a small prayer candle I keep in my bag. "For the ones still on their way," he says. "For the ones who haven't found the door yet," I answer. People ask what healing looks like. It looks like ordinary days that don't scare you. It looks like a kitchen timer used for cinnamon rolls instead of counting medicine hours. It looks like a screen door latch that means company, not warning. It looks like a binder on a shelf that you rarely open anymore, because the life in front of you runs on a different set of papers, birthday invitations, school programs, recipes with oil stains, a grandchild's drawing of a blue cup with a funny little chip. I have grandchildren now, bold, noisy, full of questions. They do not walk on eggshells. They run. They slam good doors and fall asleep in safe rooms. When they ask about the old days, I tell them the truth in pieces, the way you feed a child. Enough to grow strong, not enough to choke. They know that hurt does not get the final say in our family. Love does, and boundaries do, and the word no said at the right time by the right person. If you have listened this far, take this key with you. Your story is not decided by the person who hurt you. It is decided by the next choice you make and the help you let in. Find one steady hand. Tell one truth out loud. Put one paper in a binder. Pack one bag. Walk to one door. Small steps are not small if they carry you out. If my voice found you today, tell me where you're watching from. Your city, your town, your little dot on the map. Leave a comment for the woman reading them at 2 a.m., the way I used to read anything that sounded like hope. If you know someone who needs this story, share it with them. You might be the one who sets their feet on the road. And if you want more true stories told gently and plainly, stories where pain is real but healing is louder, subscribe. It helps these messages find the next person who needs a light on. My name is Maggie. My life did not break. The cup still holds change. The door still opens. And tonight, when I set the timer, it will be for cookies.